All righty. I think we should be recording. We are recording. Lee McCroskey here. It is another beautiful day in Nashville, Tennessee. I am wearing my lemon chiffon shirt in honor of that beautiful sport coat that Chenda was wearing in his 100K photo. So congratulations to Chenda on doing the 100K. I too ask, who's next? And some of you are like, wow, I could never do that. Yes, you can. It's very possible. If one person does it, then people say, oh, he's a freak. If two people do it, people go, And if more than two people do it, then they say, oh, look, a trend. So I'm going to challenge you to stretch and try new things. And some of you, there's lots of good things happening. I've been reading all these emails about changes to the company. It's very exciting. I wanted to start a little series. I don't know if this will be a series or not. So this is the reason we're doing a PowerPoint today, and hopefully you can see that on your screen, is that some time ago, I was talking to Levi when we were doing our little coaching sessions long ago, and he said, I was asking him for suggestions. He said, it might be nice sometime to have a visual, something for us to look at while you're going through the material. So I said, okay, fine, look at me building PowerPoints. So today we are going to talk, last week we talked about career stallers and stoppers. Do you remember that? Did anybody figure out, hey, I've been doing a career staller and that's why I've stalled? Or, well, the career stoppers, you probably wouldn't still be working here. So hopefully that was useful to you in that it identifies some activities and behaviors that could cause your career trajectory to take a nosedive or slow down. And we don't want to do that. We want to get better. So another person I was kind of chatting with briefly on email was Katrin. And she said, what might be good to talk about sometime is how to get unstuck. Like if you're kind of at a certain plateau in your production, or you're a little bit stressed out because you haven't been breaking loose and breaking through those barriers and hitting those big goals that you wanted to hit, why don't you talk about how to address some of those issues? So this will be kind of along those lines. I want to talk about this, and that is how to, I'm going to change the screen here, strategies on how to de-stress your sales career. Okay? So if you need a header, there you go. If you're taking notes, this is the headline. If you're just watching comfortably and trying to stay awake, I try to put in some nice colors to make it vibrant. All right? So, and you're like, well, where did you get this material? Some of it's mine. Some of it I actually stole from a book I read some years ago called All I Needed to Know I Learned in Kindergarten. I think that was the name of it. Or Everything I Needed to Know I Learned in Kindergarten, which means that life is actually pretty simple and we make it very complex. Is that true? I mean, as humans, how many of us take simple things and make them very complex? Is anyone like that? Yeah? How many of you take a simple process, which is basically you and a telephone and someone who answers it, and you turn it into like this mega world war thing where you're fighting against the clients, and it gets way, way, way too complex. So we're going to keep things simple and talk about how to de-stress. Okay? So here we go. Some of you look like this in between your phone calls. You're like, help me, I can't take it anymore. So here are a few things to help you out. Point one, if you want to de-stress your career, is you've got to catch your stress early. You can't wait until you suddenly come to and you find you're choking your office mate, in the next cubicle, and you're like, oh my gosh, snap out of it. What am I doing? That's when stress has gone too far. You've got to catch your stress early. All right? So that's one strategy to de-stress, is just start to notice when you're beginning to feel a little bit of pressure. All right? Because point number two, being aware is half the battle. Once you're aware that you're having problems psychologically or otherwise, then you can go, oh, wait a minute, I'm having a little challenge here. And you can nip it in the bud, as we say, right? So if you catch it early nip it in the bud, it's so much easier to contain than if you end up looking like this young lady in the photo here. So one little strategy in addition to this is to watch for warning signs. Okay? Watch for warning signs. Now take a second, if you're writing down notes or just thinking and staring at me, think for a minute, what are my early warning signs that I'm starting to feel too much pressure? Yesterday with the Australia team, somebody said, well, I just get frustrated easier. So, or I get angry. So like we would say, the metaphor, my fuse gets shorter. It takes less to upset me. Anybody like that? Yeah? Okay. Some of you start to eat more. You're like, wow, I just noticed I've had my third hot dog. Well, that can be a sign of stress. If you start to eat too much for no reason, you're trying to medicate some kind of pain or pressure. Others of you might quit eating, or some of you find that you have trouble sleeping at night. Sometimes that's an early warning sign that you're feeling a bit too much pressure. We need to deal with it. All right. So strategy number one is to catch your stress early. All right. Now, this guy, notice his body language. This is not how you want to look in between phone calls. Like, I hate my life. Why? Why me? Right? So we're not going to do anything on body language, but what I want you to know is that everybody experiences moods. And when you're in a low mood, that's the time in selling when you need to avoid analysis paralysis. How many of you tend to overthink your situation when you get a little bit down? You start thinking. And when you overthink, you end up getting more paralyzed, right? So when you're down, we have to take some steps. Here's a big thought that I want you to take away when you're feeling a little bit down and frustrated, is you never make big decisions when you're in a low mood. Okay? Never make a big decision in a low mood. When I used to work with university students and they'd be upset about their sales, I'm not doing well and blah, blah, blah. And oh, and by the way, I'm thinking about quitting. And oh, and also I sold my car. Oh, and I broke up with my girlfriend. You know, I was just like, wow. Because what do we know about being down? Eventually, what's going to happen? You will come out of it. So when I would make big decisions is when I'm on top of things, when I'm feeling confident, when I'm feeling good about myself. Your head is clear. That's a great time to make a big decision. But when you're down, when you're kind of frustrated, that is not the time to start thinking and make huge decisions. Yeah. So there you go. Look at these tips. You're like, these are so simple. I know. These are things you learned when you were in kindergarten, when you were 5. All right, here's a big thought. And I'm really sorry about the 1980s clip art that I used, but I felt compelled to use this. This is a big thought I want you to write down or memorize because we will refer to it often. When we're feeling a little bit stressed, when we're on a sales plateau, when we're not breaking out, when we're not having our best weeks, and you're having those, how many of you have thoughts that assail you? Like negative thoughts that just creep in? Anybody? I'm looking on the screen. Actually, no one has these thoughts. So this applies to me. You got to remember, thoughts are just thoughts. Okay? Thoughts are not necessarily reality. What thoughts are little tiny neurotransmissions between the synapses of your brain, little neurochemical transmissions. And how many of you know, and this was the technical way to describe this with my fingers. How many of you know that when you are, that your imagination can run wild in a negative way? Has anybody had that happen? Yes. I mean, we can start thinking thoughts. And how many of you have worried about an event? Like, let's say in school, you had a big test coming up and you thought about it, you worried about it, and you weren't necessarily studying for it. You were just thinking about it. And the more you thought about it, the worse it got. Okay? And how many of you have thought about something at some length, in some depth, and then the thing you worried about most never came to pass? Has that ever happened to anyone? Often. Okay? So what we've got to do is when those thoughts assail us, we've got to remind ourselves that thoughts are just thoughts. So I'm going to give you some thoughts, or some, I'll tell you this, we've talked about affirmations a lot. Everybody uses affirmations? Yeah? To kind of keep going, positive phrases in between sales meetings and stuff. Well, I'm going to give you some phrases or affirmations to use when your brain starts going downhill in just a minute, okay? So let's think of, let me describe what I'm talking about in a little bit more detail. This is a process by which I call mental mushrooming. Mental mushrooming works like this. It starts with a tiny little thought that's kind of negative, and then you think of another thought that's a little bit worse, and you're like, oh yeah, what about this? And then you think of another thought that's like, oh gosh, and if that happens, this will happen. And then it grows, it mushrooms, right? Who's done that? Looking on the screen. Yes, okay. So let me, if you're like, what is that? Describe this more fully. Okay, here's your first thought. When I was selling some years ago and I was frustrated, I didn't immediately jump to thoughts of quitting and this is horrible and I hate my life. It started with a teeny tiny little thought like, this isn't working. Has anybody had that thought? You're out floating or thinking about floating. And you're like, this isn't working. I'm just sitting here watching people. This isn't working. So that little tiny thought in and of itself that will not hurt you at all. Okay, but you're just noticing something, not working. Well, mental mushrooming keeps going. It doesn't stop there. The next thought you have at some point, if you just sit down and entertain that fully negative mindset, is you think, I'm not going to hit my goals. This isn't working. Okay, at this pace, I'm not going to hit my goals. And then your brain doesn't stop there. Your brain works all the time. And then you think, guilt, I'm letting everybody down. Or you start thinking, I should be doing better. I should be this. I should be that. We call that shoulding all over yourself. I should be better than I am. I should be hitting more than I should be working harder. I should be more pleasant. I should have a better tone on the phone, whatever. But you mix in a little guilt, and your brain, if you let it run, it's going to go even farther. Then you start thinking thoughts like, gosh, I hope I don't get fired. This isn't going well. And some of you are like, I don't even know what you're talking about. But take it out of LGFG. It gets worse. Finally, the last thought you could reach if you're really, really in a bad way is just, I'm a loser for life. Okay. Now, we don't want anybody to get to that stage, but all of us have experienced little tiny thoughts that expand to these negative monstrosities that can affect our behavior and our performance. So when you start to do this, if you start to have little things seep into your brain that aren't helping you, that aren't building your confidence, then here's some new positive affirmations to sort of deflect some of these bad thoughts. Okay, so let me give them to you. Here's a great one. I use this all the time. I thought to myself, if I got kind of worked, I remember I would sit down, start thinking about my situation, calculate how much money I wasn't making, or how much I was making per hour based on the fact that I hadn't sold anything, which was $0 per hour. And then rather than to really get worked up, I would just stop. I'd do this with my hands. You've seen the timeout symbol? Timeout. I'm just having thoughts. Now that decapitates your negative thoughts because you remind yourself, hey, I'm just having thoughts. Here's another thing you can connect to it. There I go again, having thoughts. Okay? And you kind of laugh. You're like, oh my gosh, I'm just having thoughts. Look at my imagination running wild. Like that old Rolling Stones song, just my imagination running away with me. Yeah, you should play that to encourage yourself. There I go again, having thoughts, my imagination. And here's a final one. If you get super negative, you can just cancel all of it by saying, it's just a thought. You know, if you go, it's not working, I'm not gonna hit my goals, I'm gonna get fired, oh my gosh, I'm losing. Stop, it's just a thought. I am just having little neurochemical transmissions in my brain. I am making all this up. So why get upset about something that probably won't happen anyway? Just a thought, okay? Is that helpful? Now that is good. Here's what, now beware. If you're sitting here taking mental notes, you cannot use these when you're doing well. Do not use these when you're winning. Because if you're just like, yeah, on my way to 50K, and you're like, wait a minute, there I go again, having thoughts, having goals, no, that would shoot down the whole process. So this is only for when you're a little bit frustrated and you need to break out of the box. Okay, a couple more thoughts and we will wrap up. Here's something that if you're in sales, a lot of times we were coached to ignore our feelings, and just forge ahead. But I think feelings are useful as long as they don't derail you, okay? Pay attention to your feelings. Like my little quote says here, feelings are just visitors. Let them come and go. Now, if you're having a big time negative feeling, do something to break your state. Get up, stretch, get in the power position. If you've seen our TED Talk that we assigned a year ago on how your body language shapes who you are, go watch that. But notice your feeling, but you can change it, break your state. I know sometimes when things are super frustrated, I would just take a very short break to kind of clear my head, and then I could get back into it. But be aware of your feelings, okay? I am not saying that, oh my gosh, I'm a little bit sad today. I think I'm going to take the week off. I'm just paying attention to my feelings. No! I mean, there's value in working hard even though you don't feel like it. But don't just completely ignore your feelings. Okay, now here's another big thought. If you're a note taker, we've talked about thoughts, being thoughts. To me, this is the hardest thing you do when you're selling, or even just being alive, is to be where you are. Do you know what I mean by this? Be where you are. Most of us are not where we are. In psychology, they would call that being present. Most of us are not present. Some of you are not present right now. You're being very polite. You're looking at the screen and your eyes are open, but your mind has drifted off to what's the week going to be like? What am I going to do this weekend? Blah, blah, we're just kind of vacant. So we're not where we are. In sales, sometimes when I would coach groups of people, say at a weekend meeting, here's what would happen to them. Most of them on a get-together, on a weekend meeting, they were supposed to take a break and have fun and be with each other, okay? They were supposed to be present, be there on that particular weekend. Well, most of them were feeling one of two things. Either one, when they got together, they were feeling guilty about the fact that they didn't do as well as they wanted to the week before in sales, right? So guilt is one option, living in the past. The other option is worrying about the future. And I can remember going to sales meetings and thinking, man, this is my day off. I should be enjoying it. But I'm already, I'm at zero again Monday. I haven't done it, So I'd feel either worried about the future or guilty about the past. So being where you are, enjoying the moment, rising up to the challenge of the moment is really important. And with clients, would it be really critically important to be where you are when you're talking to them? Yes. If you're on the phone and you're not present, you're like, why am I not setting up any appointments? Well, because you're not where you are. You're somewhere else mentally. So you got to really be in the right mental state before you engage in sales. Sales is really difficult because, it's like, I'm just making up stuff now, but to me, sales uses every aspect of you. It uses your emotions, your spirit, your brains. Physically, it's important what you do with your body when you're selling or when you're on the phone. It's a lot like wrestling, okay? If you've wrestled before, raise your hand. No one. Excellent. Another terrible analogy, but I'll just tell it to you anyway. I've been a swimmer my whole life, so I use certain muscles in my body. Trapezius, my latissimus dorsi are particularly developed. My triceps are just completely massive. Anyway, when I got in, one time I recall when I was younger, we were doing different sports in gym class, and they said, okay, the next 2 weeks we're going to do wrestling. And I thought, okay, no big deal. I'll just wrestle. I got out there and rolled around on the mat with another guy for about 5 minutes and thought I was going to die. I pulled every muscle in my body. because wrestling uses every muscle in your body. So in sales, you've got to use all your entire body. Everything goes into it. Mind, body, spirit, emotions, the whole bit. So you've got to be present. You got to be where you are to win in selling. Okay? So write that down. And if you don't understand that completely, talk to your office mates and go, let's talk about how we can be where we are. All right? Good. Next, discipline. Discipline is a word that many salespeople hate because, you know, it's just, you know, I don't know how to, it's called the D word in some circles. And if you focus on your habits, you don't need to worry about discipline. It all comes down to habits. So let me illustrate with my little PowerPoint here. If you keep doing what you've done with your existing habits, you're going to get the same results you've always gotten. Okay? If you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always got. That's what we said. So if you always are at the same level of calls, the same level of energy on the phone, the same level of, in your sales meeting, how many appointments you've got each day, you will get the same results unless you really bump your package size. Okay, you're like, I'm just selling Coronas now from now on, whatever. But if you change your habits, then you get a new vision for what the future is going to be like. You change your habits, and that changes everything. So you might ask yourself, what habits am I currently engaged in that were useful at one time but may not serve me right now? If I really want to get to 75K, if I want to join Chenda and the 100K club, whatever, I mean, set your own ranges. What habits do I need to adopt? And more importantly, what habits do I need to ditch? Because here's the thing about habits. Another point, everybody is 100% disciplined to their habits. Do you know that? You don't need to worry about discipline in areas you've already built habits in, correct? So that doesn't require discipline. It's easy because it's a habit. And here's my other thought. All of your habits, whether they're good habits or bad habits, they feel natural to you. Think about that. All of our habits, whether they're good or bad, they feel natural. When my son was 15 and he spent a lot of time playing Halo, how many of you know Halo? Remember that? It's kind of fun. And World of Warcraft, anybody? I won't have you raise your hands because, well, most of those people probably aren't working here anymore. But my son was he had such a good habit of getting online and playing World of Warcraft. You know, he was like poning noobs with his shoddy on Halo, and he could go for hours at a time, and it took no discipline. I didn't have to wake him up in the morning and say, hey, Luke, get out of bed. We really want you to get on schedule, making sure that you're winning online and you're killing all those bosses or whatever. I forget the terminology. But I would just watch. But he was very good at it, and it didn't require any grinding discipline or grit because he just made it a habit. One of his friends at college was so good at it that he actually dropped out of school. So it's a true story. So he was very disciplined to the point, and he got back in school and did fine, but he had to experience that bit of failure. So focus on your habits. You don't need to worry about like, must do this, gotta work, blah. You know, that's not the way to go about it. Our brain doesn't like that. Last thought, we'll wrap up. Sometimes in selling, we get so one answer to increasing our production is to just work harder. And there's nothing wrong with hard work. I am not describing that, but understand that life is not an emergency. The house isn't on fire all the time. I mean, I used to work with, and I still know people, whenever I see them, their self-talk is like, how you doing? If I see them at church or whatever, they're like, how's it going? And they're like, oh, it's so crazy. I'm like, I just think to myself, why are you describing your life like that? You're reinforcing what you don't want. It's so crazy. We've got 2 kids and I'm running this and I'm flying here and I've got too much to do and I've got clients and I got 400 emails a day and I don't know how to I'm pulling my hair out. I can't work out, etc. And I just think there's a time and a place to work hard. There's also a time and a place, if you notice the second line there, take time for you. Take time for you. We are like cell phones. You just don't turn on your cell phone and use it for a day or two, and then you watch the battery go down to zip, and then it dies, and you just go, well, battery died, you know, didn't have time to recharge it. No, we got to recharge our phones. We have to recharge ourselves. So what can we do to recharge ourselves? We've talked about this on previous calls. It's good when you're you're looking at week blocks of time, if you're planning that way, to think, when is my free time going to be? When is my workout time going to be? When is my reading time going to be? You know, if you do those things, then it doesn't feel like the house is on fire all the time. Oh my gosh, there's so much to do. I don't have enough time to do it. You know, all my to-dos have piled up and they've landed on the next day. Oh my gosh, am I going to attack that? And the list is even longer. You know, just doesn't feel right. And some of us do that with our selling. I knew people that sold a certain amount, but they had a goal to hit something and they didn't hit it. So what they did was they took how much they were short and added it to the next week. Well, this week I've only got to hit 700 units or whatever. Then they fell short and they go, okay, well, next week I've got to hit 2,000. And it kept building, and it doesn't work well. So if you can remember, life is not an emergency, and how you can build time in for yourself, that way you can pace yourself. Because to me, having a great career at LGFG is like a marathon. And these you build in little water stations every so often, so you can, like, you know, take a drink, keep going, but you pace yourself in a marathon. You can't sprint all the time. It doesn't work. You can sometimes, and it's good, and you need to, but sometimes you've got to back off a little bit and chill and recharge. Okay? So those are some thoughts. And I know that thoughts are just thoughts, but those are good thoughts. So I'm going to encourage you to adopt these, to maybe talk about these in your little offices around the world. Try to adopt some of them. If you see somebody that's mentally mushrooming, kind of just say, whoa, hold on, you're just having thoughts. And you're like, oh yeah, woo, thank you. So anyway, good stuff. Carry on. I'm excited. It's almost June now, and that means we're getting closer to our August meetings, which I'm excited about being with you guys and teaching you some more stuff. So hopefully this is helpful. You guys have a fantastic week, and welcome, Dimitri, to the call, but we're wrapping up. So do well. Onwards. See ya. Bye-bye.